Hey guys, how you doing? I hope you're doing okay. I'm going to read through the full article here. There's a link in the description, and it's a bit of a more generalized topic or discussion. It does mention a couple of different cases of suicide at the hands of sextortion. It discusses the case of Ryan Last and also Tevin Tobler, and I'm familiar with the case of Jordan John DeMay. So these three young men each committed suicide following blackmail, sextortion. So this is a rampant issue, and I thought it's important. So this is a nice article. It gives a lot of good information, perhaps a bit of an introduction to the subject to those that aren't that familiar. And it is very important, I believe, as others have mentioned, to increase awareness of this topic of sextortion. So there's going to be various aspects of sextortion, blackmail, but seemingly most of this is occurring over the internet from overseas criminal organizations that are merely trying to embarrass, shame, blackmail young men into handing over as much money as possible. And then seemingly there are multiple cases of where these criminals prompt, push, encourage the young men who are going to be feeling distraught, embarrassed, ashamed, all of these different emotions, I would imagine. There are multiple cases of these extortionists pushing and encouraging these boys to commit suicide. So this article, as I say, is going to discuss Ryan Last and Tevin Tobler. And recently I made a video in regards to the tragic case of Jordan John DeMay. And it is, as I say, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but it is very important to increase the awareness so that parents have a better understanding of sextortion, but really for the kids. In my mind, I'll go on a bit of a ramble before we get into things, but in my mind, the kids, they need to know that if they do something, this is my opinion, and some of you may disagree with my opinion, some of you may view my opinion abhorrent, but I'm going to say it anyway. To me, these kids need to know that it's, if you do something that you shouldn't do on the internet, it's not the end of the world. You know, if you post pictures, you send DMs that you ought not to. Meaning, if you show pictures of yourself of nudity and you're under the age of 18, you ought not do that. I believe in some states that's going to be considered child pornography, even, which I object to. I feel that's demonizing young people too much, way too much. I massively disagree with that, and perhaps that's a view that you find abhorrent. But to me, these are kids being kids, and they have access to technology. They have access to tools that us guys of older generations, we never had these tools. I mean, what if we did? Well, then maybe we'd be doing these foolish things too. And these guys here, they're at ground zero. They're the guinea pigs. They've been handed these tools whilst they've got these hormones, whilst they've got a limited understanding of the world. And lo and behold, they're making mistakes. And some of them are being crucified for that by these extortionists. And, regrettably, I'll say this in a clumsy way, but by themselves too, in some sense, in that they are blaming themselves for their foolishness, and they're blaming themselves too much to the point that they are committing suicide. Whereas if they had a little bit more of awareness that, hey guys, look, you guys are the guinea pigs in regards to using social media at a young age, and there are traps, there are minefields, and if you get stuck in one of these traps, if you tread on one of these minefields, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. You know, these things can be overcome. Okay, so that's what they need. I think. I think I'm right in saying. Yes, of course, educating the parents, making the parents more aware, so that they can perhaps try to monitor the activities on the internet of their children. Yes, that's a good thing. But in my mind, look, kids are going to do what kids are going to do, aren't they? You know, the parents can't, and I would say as a non-parent shouldn't interfere in every last aspect of these young men and young women. You know, we're not talking 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds. I mean, I'm sure there are some cases of that. But, you know, more so, and certainly in the examples given here, we're talking 16, 17-year-olds. These are young men, young women. They don't need their entire lives monitored by their parents, I would think. That would be my point of view. I know I've gone on a big ramble there, but I guess the points that I wanted to express is that, yes, absolutely, awareness needs to be increased in regards to this subject, sextortion, and this article goes a long way, so we will look through that in just a moment. And my view is that the kids just need to be reassured that if they do succumb to one of these traps, that it will be okay, that they will be forgiven for whatever their transgressions are. You know, the other kids will forgive them should things become public. Because this is all just following natural behavior. You know, being a little bit flirty on the internet. It's all natural behavior. Anyway, there's my rambling. So I'll start reading through the article at this point. Internet blackmailers are increasingly duping young men and boys into sending them sexually explicit content online by posing as young girls on social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram, I would imagine Twitter too, and then extorting them in a scheme known as sextortion. Dozens of these cases have ended with the victims taking their own lives. In a sign of how serious the problem is becoming, the FBI's field office in Los Angeles released a warning last month aimed directly at the parents of young men caught in the crosshairs of these cyber criminals who often operate in foreign countries. Here's a quote from an FBI representative. The FBI is receiving an increasing number of reports of adults posing as young girls, coercing young boys through social media to produce sexual images and videos, and then extorting money from them. So I'll just say a couple of words just to clarify that. I'm sure it's pretty straightforward, but just to clarify. So essentially, these organized criminals that are typically based overseas are creating social media accounts, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it happens to be, and they're having pictures of sexy young ladies, and they're essentially with that creating a honey trap. They're pretending to be a young lady, an attractive young lady. They're catfishing, and of course, naturally, in my opinion, if you're a young man and you're scrolling through these websites that you have access to on your phone, you have access to it 24/7, you're going to look for profiles of attractive ladies, and perhaps you send one a DM and they reply, and a conversation ensues, and you believe that they're a real person, that they are the young lady that they're presenting themselves to be, and your mind falls to lust or love or whatever it happens to be, a crush forms or whatever, and before you know it, you're in the trap. And I would think, personally, that's a very easy trap for young men to fall into. So yes, absolutely, they need to be made aware of that. Hey guys, if you're going to be scrolling through social media and contacting, let's say, strangers, just remember that there could be a trap. Some of them will pretend to be attractive young ladies, and will lead you down a garden path, which you ought not go down. So anyway, back to the article. Dozens of boys have reported being victims of sextortion, mostly for money, although others were reportedly sextorted for additional images. One of those victims was 17-year-old Ryan Last, who lived near San Jose, California. Ryan Last died by suicide in February after an extortionist threatening to post compromising pictures of him on the internet was demanding more and more money from the teen. Here's a quote from the mother. They wouldn't give up, and he felt that he had no choice but to do it to protect his family. He loved us so much that he wanted to protect us from the mistake that he had made. Local police forces also report seeing a rise in cases in which blackmailers focus on young men. Here's a quote from a sergeant of San Jose Police Department. 20-30 years ago, predators would go to a playground or a park to find young victims. Now, there's an entire virtual world out there for them to get into and pick their victims that way. Yeah, I'm just going to comment on that. I mean, yeah, the internet does offer access to tens of millions of people. So if you're an organized crime network, if you're a scammer, a fraudster, a sextortionist, a blackmailer, you could easily industrialize attempts to blackmail people. You know, you could just do this as a full-time job, and you contact hundreds of potential victims a day, and there'll be a certain percentage in which you get a hit, a certain percentage where, you know, a young man or such does engage, does send some pictures, and then you're able to attempt to reel them in. And some of those will yield people paying out money in sheer panic, in sheer fear of being exposed. So I can well imagine that, this is absolutely a well-oiled machine. And I would imagine that there's a lot of people that do this, regrettably, that are sextortionists, blackmailers on the internet. I can imagine it's incredibly prevalent and growing, seemingly. In Utah, Detective Sergeant John Pierce at the Davis County Sheriff's Office said he has investigated dozens of sextortion cases. In at least 6 instances, someone committed suicide. Nationwide, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these cases, and there are many also not being reported. One of the cases is that of Tevin Tobler, a 16-year-old from Utah who died by suicide in September 2017. His parents recently revealed that their son, an honor student and champion high school wrestler, who was also an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, had been targeted by a blackmailer from the Ivory Coast. Third world country, essentially. So the officer went through the young man's cell phone records, and he discovered that the young man had been hounded for money by somebody who had texted him more than 1,000 times. In some cases, as frequently as every 30 seconds. So yeah, I mean, as I say, there's this industrial approach to this kind of extortion. You can copy and paste, you follow processes, and you can really fucking harass these young men to the point that they commit suicide. In this particular case here, the young man was urged to take his own life by the blackmailer, the sextortionist, after all of his money had been taken. In this part, the article tells us that this is something which is exploding, that there is sexual exploitation of boys. Boys are particularly vulnerable in regards to this crime. You know, I mean, I guess I'm just telling you things that you already know, but I guess boys at this age are more actively seeking some kind of sexual release or something along those lines than girls. They're putting themselves in a more vulnerable position, and apparently they're less likely to tell anybody what had happened due to shame. So we need to let these kids know that mistakes happen, that traps are set, and some people will fall into them, but it's okay, that you can get out of that, and it's all fine. Everything will be forgiven by family, by friends, and that essentially, the urges to do these kind of things just come from natural biological needs. So it's nothing to be demonized. Attempting to flirt with someone on the internet is nothing to be demonized, is the point that I'm trying to make. The article tells us that in the case of Ryan Last, he raided his college fund to pay off blackmailers, and as soon as he had paid as much as he could, they continued to pressure him to send more money, at which point the young man killed himself. Apparently, these organized crime networks are occurring mostly overseas, including Nigeria, India, and especially the Ivory Coast. So I would hope that the fact that law enforcement are getting an increasingly better understanding of these cases and these networks, I would hope that they're in a stronger position to clamp down on them, to stop them from occurring. And perhaps that's something that these social media companies ought to be involved in as well. Perhaps there's room to petition for social media companies to be more active in their policing or guarding against sextortionists, scam artists, fraudsters deriving from these countries in particular, perhaps. There is a little bit more to the article, but I think we've covered pretty much everything here, so I'm going to wrap things up. Again, condolences to all victims of this situation, particularly those that take their own lives, and the families of those that have taken their own lives. It's such a dreadful shame. These are good kids. These are good, talented kids that are starting their life out, and they make a mistake, which to me, in my mind, and again, some of you may disagree with some of the thoughts I've expressed, but these are normal mistakes to make. These are easy traps to fall into, to be catfished, to chat with someone online who is an attractive person that you find attractive. These kind of things, they're not in themselves to be demonized. Attempting to chat with somebody online ought not be demonized. Attempting to chat with somebody that you find attractive online ought not be demonized. And of course, young people are going to play around in this kind of way. That's not to be demonized. The aspect which needs to be demonized is the exploitation of that by these organizations, which are typically based overseas. And so we do need to increase awareness, as I say, for the parents, so that they have a better understanding, so that they can tell their kids, hey kid, if you get into trouble, you come to us, you come to your parents, okay, and we'll talk it through, we'll figure things out. The kids need to be told that the parents are aware of the whole subject. Let's not cover it up. Let's not half talk about it. The parents, I think, I'm going off the top of my head here, but I'm thinking that the kids need to have a very honest, open conversation with their children. At what age, I don't really know, but let's say 15 onwards, something like that, where they're saying, hey, look, guys, you need to be aware that blackmail and sextortion is a thing on the internet. You need to be aware of it. And let me tell you what that is. What that is if you were to contact a fake profile, and if you were to say things or do things that could potentially be embarrassing, then that can be thrown back in your face. That could have been a trap set purposefully that you've fallen into, and there could be repercussions from that. The blackmailers may request more images to be sent for their own sick purposes. They may request money to be sent. There could be other ramifications. And so the kids need to be told that the parents know all about this. And so the kids are told they know about it too. And arguably, most importantly, or one of the important aspects, is for the parents to express to the kids that it's going to be okay. If you do fall into this kind of trap, it's going to be okay. We'll get you out of the trap. Just come forward to us. We'll talk about it, and we'll make sure that you're safely out of this trap. Because playing along with these sextortionists, these blackmailers, is going to be going down a very, very dark road. So there we go. So I'm going to wrap things up. Hopefully this has been a nice coverage. I've tried to be respectful. I believe I have. But it is an interesting article, and I do hope that this is something which is awareness increases. And I do think that perhaps petitioning the social media companies is a good way to go. I don't know. That's just a thought that's occurred to me. They ought to be in a position to be able to monitor and effectively block, moderate such activity from certain countries. They should be able to be in a position, I believe, to be alerted to situations where 1,000 messages are sent in half an hour to a younger person. So hopefully that aspect of internet security is focused on. But I'll wrap things up here, guys. Thanks for your time. Please do like, comment, subscribe, share. And again, full condolences to all those that have been victims and families of the victims of this type of things.